Okay. Now, basically what I'm going to talk about today is that my view is that more and more value in agriculture is going to be generated out of technology and data. Therefore, there's going to be a massive demand for people who have the capability of creating value from that. So not just technical issues, but actually business models and collaboration and networks, etc. And that those skills are not just about agriculture, they're transferable into a whole range of other areas which are going to be critical for the health and viability of regional communities for the next 50 years. So if kids see opportunities in those sort of areas, it's actually, there's lots of career opportunities outside of agriculture, but also keeping those kids and giving them opportunities in their regional community is really important. So I grew up in Frankston and ended up as a dairy cattle veterinarian in Kahuna, which was a bit of a transition. And the reason I ended up there was because during my veterinary course, we were required to go out and do farm experience and then go and do large animal veterinary practice experience. And from the moment I went to the country, I was hooked and wanted to be out and doing that sort of work. But that's one avenue to get people involved in, obviously, in the regions. But my view is that we lose far too many young people over capacity to, and will to stay in their communities because they don't have the opportunities and career paths that they could otherwise have. So if you want to follow me today and later on, that's my head. I'm going to wander around in between you, so make sure you stay awake. Just before I start, three things. First of all, there's a few links and stories in this presentation which we'll make available afterwards for you, so online, so you can look at that if you want to follow a particular story. So don't worry about trying to scribble down web addresses and that sort of thing. Secondly, Kerry said there'd be time for questions at the end, but I actually want you to interrupt me and argue with me, because I very strongly believe that the room is much smarter than the individual, so my job is to stimulate you here. And thirdly, to encourage you to do that a bit, I've brought along a prize. So I have one of three t-shirts, and that's the last one, can't put that one yet. So you can either win this one, which I put on the other day when I was judging a VC pitch class at Swinburne University, or you can have this one. That, obviously because of the colour, that's only for the males. Or you can have this one, which I don't think you're allowed to wear in your classrooms, but I'm sure you can put it on when you get home. Okay, so there's only one for prize, so for the best argument against what I'm saying. The other reason I'm putting that up is that's actually a company which was started 2 years ago by an ex-female Marine designing and selling t-shirts online. And she's gone from 0 sales to $10 million of sales in the space of 2 years by a purely digital technology-based business. So they're in the design part, they don't own any manufacturing, they don't have any inventory. If you order them, they get them made and then they get them delivered, all completely separate. So that's just an example of opportunities. Now, this is what I'm going to do overall for that introduction from before. So I'm going to talk a little bit about futurists because sometimes people get a bit confused about what we do. I'm going to talk about digital technologies and the fact that big data is the key to digital technologies. That little break there is for, up above it, which you can't see, is about some examples about what the ecosystem looks like in agriculture, in my view, in the next decade. Then I'm going to talk about the transferable skills, so just one example of another area in regional areas where the sort of skills I'm talking about can be transferred. And then what I think the three key skills are when you're talking about career opportunities. So, futurists. I like putting up this picture because it sort of informs people what I do. So I get a lot of this. I get in taxis, I get in aeroplanes, and I get that question, where's your crystal ball? This is exactly what my family thinks I do, which is not, the road ahead and where's things heading. They've got no idea. In fact, my mother on the weekend said to me, my friends keep asking me, this is her saying this, you know, what do you do? And I sort of try and explain, you help people, you know, think about what the future will look like. And they go, but how does he know? So my family still struggles, and they're actually surprised that people will actually sit down and listen and pay to have me talk to them. When my partner quite often pulls a $100 bill out of her purse in the night time and says she'll give it to me if I shut up. I've never got the $100 yet. But the real reason is this picture. So this is my answer to what futurists do, and that is I help people think about what does that jigsaw puzzle look like. A few more pieces in that puzzle, while still accepting there's going to be holes all the way through that. So if you get a futurist or someone who's talking about the future comes in and tells you this is what the future of education looks like, or this is what the future of the regions look like, etc., they are lying to you. Because essentially it's getting harder and harder to know what that looks like. The key skill and capacity is about how do you think about what it might look like to build strategies which will work in multiple scenarios, not some sort of guru-like prediction. So for example, the other day I was travelling along in the car and a guy on the radio was saying what the gold price would be next year. There's two things with that. If I knew what the gold price was going to be next year, I wouldn't be telling anybody. And secondly, he's either lying to himself or he's lying to you, or both, which is probably the worst thing, because if they can convince themselves they really do know, they're even crazier. So that's what I do. And to give a sense of what that looks like and how that's getting harder and harder, we're going to do a little bit of time travel. So I'm going to go back to 1995. It should be this sort of, you know, music and sort of your vision should blur at this point. But this was 1995. This guy was Prime Minister. This woman was 21 years away from being President of the United States. This was the Australian cricket captain. And given the way we've been going recently, he would like me back. This guy had hair. Actually, when Kerry was introducing before about saying I should pat on the nose, I remember the first big presentation I gave to about 1,000 people where there was cameras on me. I was doing this joke where I had to look at what was behind me on the wall. I turned around, all I could see was, I had more hair than I have now. All I could see was a big bald patch. It was focused, the camera, yeah, don't do that. The camera was focused right on this big bald patch. And I actually stood there mesmerised because I hadn't seen it before. That's the time. This is the best-selling song in 1995, like Gangster's Paradise. This is what mobile phones look like. And yes, the iPhone was released in 2007. And you think about how much the world has changed and since that date, we sometimes forget how short a time it has been. And just to prove that everything always remained the same, there was a financial crisis. So that's Nick Leeson bringing down Barron's Bank. So let's fast forward now. That's 1995. It's 2015 now. Now these are 6 things I've just pulled out of our scanning database. So we run a weekly scanning process about what the future looks like and what might be happening. These are 6 things I just pulled out randomly, semi-randomly, over the last few weeks. That's a 3D printed plane that weighs 15 kilos and has a 3-metre wingspan and can fly at 250 kilometres an hour. These guys have actually managed to run a model in monkeys and rats to actually record memories as they are generated, obliterate those memories and then play them back inside the brain and restore the memories in the process. And they're just in their first human trials. Now we're not at Matrix sort of plug the thing in the back of your head, learn jiu-jitsu stage, but these are really promising for people who have memory problems and particularly around epilepsy and a whole range of things like that. Virtual reality is at the stage where it's now commercialising. So we've had promise of this for a long period of time, but it's now here. We've got Oculus Rift, we've got HoloLens, we've got a whole Samsung gear. I've got a recommendation for you. If you haven't heard of it, go to North Melbourne and go to Zero Latency VR. This one you have to write down, it's not in here. I went there a few weeks ago and fought the zombie apocalypse. And it was freaking awesome. Now you think that's funny, right? But it's actually, I'll tell you a bit of experience. So you go there and they put these goggles on you, you're in a space probably 3 times the size of this room. Put goggles on you, put headphones on you, you can't see anything's blank. They give you a gun, it's actually quite heavy. And then they turn it all on. And you know you're in this space, and it all feels a little bit clunky. It runs for about an hour, 5 minutes in, the world is gone. You're just totally engaged in this process. Your top brain, which knows that you're still in this room, has just gone away, and your lizard brain's taken over, right? And towards the end, you had to cross this sort of rickety bridge that had deep fall on either side, and you were being chased by zombies, right? And you knew, I knew, that I could just do this. And I went like this. So these technologies, they're not quite there yet. I mean, they're commercialising now, but they're going to be amazing from the point of view of teaching technologies, training technologies, but they're going to change a whole lot of other industries. Social media has completely changed how we look at news and how we get news and what it's done to the media organisations. Social media, in my view, is dead. We're actually moving towards a messaging app ecosystem now. So if you think about things like WeChat and Facebook Messenger, etc., that's the future rather than the current social media sites. Had disruption, think about a whole range of areas. Skype means for international phone calls, but huge reductions in the cost of doing stuff, which makes huge changes in the way we can do stuff. And there's over 1 billion phone connections in India now. 976 million of those are mobile. And most of them now, because of improvements in technology, are smartphones. Right? They may be not the top range ones, they may have lesser capabilities, but you can now, there was smartphones advertised, Android smartphone advertised on Amazon the other day for $7.99. Walmart had a much more expensive offering at $11.99. So, but those are the sort of ranges we get in this sort of capability of connecting. So that's just 6 examples. That's 2015. So if you think about those 20 years, for some of you in the room that's not very long, and for others it's sort of most of your lives, but if you think there's been change in that period, my advice is, and I don't make predictions, is strap yourself in, because my view is you're going to see as much change in the next 5 years as you've seen in that 20. And that's the reality, and that means that a girl starting in year 7 this year is going to move into a totally different world just when she finishes high school. Not what skills does she need in 10 years after she graduates from high school. So, that's the framing of the environment in which we live. We'll talk about digital technologies. I did a thing for Simplot's digital leadership or transformation process the other day. I asked them what a digital technology was. And there was 25 sort of mid-level managers within Simplot there, and they gave me 29 different definitions. So I wanted to put this up, because that's my view of it. The use of data through technology to create value or solve a problem. So if you're talking about different learning environments, it's about how do you create better value or solve a problem in that system. If you're producing an application, if you're using drones, it's about how you actually, data is central to all of that. The technology is actually the collection, the use of that data, so data is central to that process. And if we think about automation and human skills, we're moving through this sort of epoch change, essentially. So if you think about the skills of humans being in these 4 areas, so repetitive tasks down the bottom and non-repetitive tasks down up the top, we have, over the last period of time, we've concentrated really on removing humans from large parts of this. So, if you go to a car manufacturing plant, all you see essentially is industrial robots. There's a great story that a guy from A16Z, the most recent Horrocks, the VC, did the other day, describing an insurance company in 1930-something as just a huge spreadsheet. Right? So there's all these people sitting around a desk with a calculator on each of them, calculating all these numbers. that whole floor had been replaced by a spreadsheet, because each of them was just a calculation going on inside a box. So we moved lots of people out of this. What we're doing now is moving up into this other area. We're actually going into collaborative manufacturing where robots can work with people to manufacture stuff. We're moving into artificial intelligence systems where people are getting those non-repetitive cognitives, those sense-making, design, etc., other skills are being moved, technology is moving to those areas as well. So the question was posed before in the panel, you know, what should your advice be to kids and stuff in that situation? And that my advice is that it is about those high-level skills. It's about design, it's about innovation, it's about collaboration, it's about the technology which fuels some of these things, because we're experiencing, in my view, what those been termed a hollowing out of the middle. So we're going to have low-wage jobs that are maybe manual and repetitive or don't require a whole lot of skills that are harder to replace because just the costs are low, so you can be in there. Or we're going to have high cognitive skill jobs, or we're going to have high social empathy jobs. But the middle in between is going to get completely hollowed out. So those are the three key areas where there's going to be jobs mainly in the future. High social empathy, high design innovation skills, or low paid. Those are the three areas. I know there's the one area where I wouldn't want to be. And if you think about agriculture, I'm going to come back to this in a minute, but you can either get these sort of technologies and skills down the supply chain, so you can go, how do we put all this together with cost reductions, with tractors, with genetic systems for breeding, a whole range of things like that. Or you can go closer and closer to the customer and use technologies for information and communication for the actual agricultural produce to be more closely connected to the individual. I'm going to come back to that because I've got a bit of detail around that. But I wanted to talk first about big data and how that underpins everything, because artificial intelligence is a big driver of this process. And artificial intelligence has gone through a phase change. It used to be about heuristics and a whole range of things. It's now gone to what people essentially call machine learning, which, you know, to dumb it down, is learning like a child learns, a young child. So learning by experience and learning by exceptions. And so masses and masses and masses of data, and you can actually pick out and learn in that process. I wanted to challenge something that Darren said earlier, and I was going to interrupt, but I thought I've got plenty of time to talk now anyway.
You've got the floor now.
That's right. So he made this statement about, you know, if you put an iPhone in the hands of an 8-year-old, or you put a driverless tractor in the hands of an Xbox aficionado, that, you know, well, how quickly will they be able to do that sort of stuff? The trouble is, I totally agree with him, and all he was saying about critical thinking and networking and all those skills. The trouble is, the value is not going to be created at the interface level. The value is going to be created by creating all the systems that feed into that, not having an easy, you know, being able to play with an iPhone or drive a tractor through an Xbox interface. And so, getting skills and understanding what goes on beyond that interface is going to be a critical part. So I want to spend a bit of time on big data because I think it's really important to understand it. I always get a laugh at that point. Well, no one has laughed at this point. Is this because it's too close to the bone inside schools? Okay. So, big data. If you want big data to work, and go back to that definition I had about creating value or solve a problem, you need 4 things. You need collection. Okay? Because if I wear a Fitbit or a sensor or whatever, or if my phone does GPS tracking of my movements, all those things, I used to move before I had a phone. My heart used to beat before I put the Fitbit on, right? So all the data is already there. It's about the collection process. The second bit is you need to store it. So you need the capacity to store data at an economic level which gives you value. If that storage is too expensive, it doesn't work. You need distributed computing. So if you've got all this information in different boxes and stored everywhere, etc., you need the capacity to go across that and actually make value out of it. And lastly, you need the application. So, you know, in the end, the person using the technology doesn't have to understand all of that stack. They just want something in their hand that works. So, collection. We're now moving to the point where collection systems are getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. So that's essentially a medical tattoo that they can slap on you after you've been in a hospital visit, and it will collect your data for a few days after you left the hospital, and then it will fall off as your skin grows out. Right? Talking about making those 10 cents. If we talk about agriculture, this company has just won Startup of the Year at the Web Summit in Dublin, which is called Fitbit for cows, essentially. It's Connectera, but it's actually about tracking cows. And you see down here, they're talking about, they say their service will produce increased productivity by 20% or more. So if you're talking about improving productivity, creating value, reducing costs, it's these sort of technologies collecting that data. Storage. I said before, it's got to be economic. That is an 8 terabyte Seagate drive you could buy at Christmas in America last year for $260. Would anybody like to guess that if you wanted to buy that amount of storage in 1982, what it would have cost you?
Millions.
When you say
1982.
Did it exist then? Was it that much then?
That's a good question. I haven't actually researched that, but if you, just on a cost per megabyte basis.
Well, in 1994, 16 megagrams, $1,400 in LA.
The answer is $4 billion. Right? So the government's just started this process of the ISPs collecting your metadata off your phone and internet stuff, right? If it cost them $4 billion every week to store it, we wouldn't be doing it. Right? But as these costs come down, it enables you to do stuff that you couldn't do before, because if you want to collect all this data and it costs you all this money, you can't make an economic case to producing something from it. The next bit is distributed computing. Has anybody got this at home on their phone, on their computer? You can actually get it on your phone now. Right, so this started in 2000. It's called, it's a protein folding thing. So even while you sleep, your computer can work and solve medical problems. Their stated aim, when they started, was to solve problems that would take 1 million CPU days. So if you put that on one computer with one CPU, it would take 2,739 years to solve that problem. If you put that on 400,000 computers with one CPU, you solve the same problem in 2.5 days. So it's that capacity to actually put that computing power across multiple boxes and to grab all the data which is up there and use it that produces that machine learning artificial intelligence. Now, that gives you two things. It gives you speed. You can do stuff you couldn't do before. Because you don't want a medical problem that you plug into a computer and say, I'll wait for 2,739 years. You're just not going to do that, are you? The other thing that does, though, is actually allow predictive analysis, because it allows you to create enough computing power and enough systems to take all that data and make models out of it that allow you to predict stuff. So, for example, there's more and more cars now being connected to the internet. You could actually say, let's connect all the internet connected cars in Melbourne onto a computer model, and let's fake all the other cars that aren't connected yet and make them just by making them individual models. You could then do predictions of traffic flow if you wanted to change speed limits or traffic lights or a whole range of things. You can do the same thing in biological systems in agriculture. What if we change this? What if we change that? It won't necessarily give the answer. What it will do is surface better questions. So you can actually say, we'll look at 1,000 things, we'll winnow it down to 4 or 5 things that we can try in the real world and go and do experiments and research with. And the last thing is application. So I said before, people in terms of farmers or anybody doing anything, they don't want to know about all that stuff. They don't want to, it's like driving a car these days. Modern car has 25,000 lines of software code in it. You don't want to know how that works. You just want to get in, be able to turn the key, and it goes. Right? So you want applications. Now, to give you an example, which I guarantee will stick in your head, Mattel just released a new talking Barbie. Has anybody bought one? I haven't. Now, you know, we used to have these Barbies. This is for the young, I'll talk to you now. We used to have these Barbies where you pull this string in the back of them and they'd talk to you. I'm sure you have never seen them. So you do that and you pull it again, they say something different. They'd have like 6 or 8 different lines. Fantastic, right? Then they put a computer chip in them so they would talk to you out of the computer chip. Still no? I'm getting really old. So this one is internet connected and is connected to a cloud-based artificial intelligence so that if your child talks to it, what it says goes up into the cloud analyses and sends back to the Barbie what to say. It currently has 8,000 possible responses and it will learn. So your child can have that conversation today and say exactly the same thing to the Barbie tomorrow and it will say something different. So it's a bit like Siri, right, in terms of the iPhone. Just a warning for you, if you're having an argument with your spouse, and I'm particularly talking to the gentleman in the room here, if you're having an argument with your spouse, turn off the internet. Because the Barbie is always listening. And likely as not, it will join in. And I know whose side it's going to take. Now it's just an example of it sticking in your head, but the point I'm trying to make is that most of the applications that you're going to see that are actually at the coalface for farmers and all the way through the supply chain are going to be cloud-based, artificial intelligence-driven applications with all that stuff in the background that you don't really need to worry about when you're using them, but that's where the value and the jobs and the opportunities are going to be. So let's go back to this picture. So I said you could go down the supply chain or you could go towards the customer from where you are now. If you go down the supply chain, you can improve cost structures, right? So that Fitbit example I gave before for cows, that's about improving productivity, improving costs. You can go further down the supply chain and end up in a supply innovation network where you're connecting with a whole lot of other people in the supply chain. You can go more towards the customer and deepen that customer relationship. You can get more connected, you can get more communication, more transparency. Or you can get complete ecosystem transformation where you join that together. What I mean by is join completely from all the R&D, the genomics, all the way through the customer. So let's have a look at those in a bit more detail. So improve cost structures. You know, you're going to have a little session later on about tractors and those sort of things. Precision agriculture has been the big driver of some of this, the early stages of this data, right? So what it's saying here is that data analytics in cropping, this is America, have done this. Reduced costs by 15% and increased yields by 13%. So reduced costs by getting data, recording it as they're sowing, as they're harvesting, etc. Mapping that against historical data from their own farm, mapping it against other similar farms and comparing results, doing a whole range of things. So for example, in the sugar industry in Queensland, when they're harvesting cane now, they have a differential algorithm which measures how hard the machine is working when it's harvesting each square metre. You can then take that information back and it actually correlates very well with the yield. Right? So they're not actually measuring the yield, they're just measuring how hard the machine is working, and that's related to the density of the crop in that area. They can then map that against satellite and soil monitoring systems, and they can actually then, when they come to use that paddock next time around, they can differentially put nutrients on that paddock depending on its profile. So some areas will get more nutrients because they're actually more fertile. Other areas will get a different mix of nutrients because they've got poor fertility but they want to build them up. So that's the sort of thing we're talking about from a precision agriculture point of view. This is a graph from a report from Merrill Lynch that's just been released about a week ago, that and what they're predicting is, this is just in America, that agricultural drones will become more than half of all the drones in the United States, and will generate in agriculture in the next 10 years 100,000 jobs and $82 billion worth of economic activity. Because if you think about that tractor only goes over when it's applying fertiliser, or it only goes over when it's harvesting or when it's spraying. If you've got drones, you can send them over 3 days a week. You can get pictures down to the point of 2 centimetre focus that can give you chlorophyll levels, which can give you ideas about disease levels, about productivity, about density, a whole range of things. So drones are going to become a huge thing. And this is another development which will be out shortly, which is a weeding robot for horticulture operations. And if you think about that from a technology and data point of view, that's largely a data and vision recognition. So it's the capacity to go, that's a weed, that's not, and then to destroy that weed. In this case, what it does is actually it identifies a weed and then buries it far enough down so it can't grow anymore. Now, they're saying it's got an 80% accuracy right now. The interesting thing about these technologies is they learn. So Sebastian Thrum, who's one of the big robotics guys in the world, has made a statement that says the thing about cloud-based, so connected robotics, is that once one robot in that system learns from a mistake, no other robot will ever make that mistake ever again. So it's that connection and that capacity to actually learn that's important in the process. So that's about just on-farm data collection, etc. What you can talk about then is connecting that up. Once you connect it up, you get more innovation. This is a mobile phone battery production, mobile phone tower battery production system that GE owns. This is from 2013. It has 10,000 sensors in the factory. They measure the production of every single battery that goes through, and then they match all of that data to the performance of the batteries in the field. So they can tell you for every single battery they've made, who was actually working that day, what was the humidity, what was the temperature, what were all the batches of the materials that were used, a whole range of factors, and they can relate that to performance over the next 5 to 10 years of those batteries in the field, and they can go back all the way through their supply chain, they can go back to their R&D, and they can completely reconfigure based on the data they've collected and the performance from that. Now GE is saying by 2020 they will have, because of the knowledge they've gained in this process, they will have a $15 billion software business that is supplying that sort of analytic capacity to other industries, to agriculture, to a whole range of things. So they're betting really big on this being a huge industry. If you think about that from agriculture's point of view, the essence is if we can collect all this data, if we can relate it back to, we can connect up to the R&D corporations, we can connect up to international researchers, we can connect up to crowdfunding sources, we can connect up to the breeders, we can connect up to genomics companies, we can do a whole range of things that makes that an innovation network all connected together. And this is a project that MLA, Meat and Livestock Australia, put out only a few weeks ago. What they're looking for is development of an information exchange platform for red meat, so for beef and sheep. And the idea is that all the information that comes from, you know, those Fitbits for cows, for the tags in sheep, from the national livestock identification systems, from the meat grading systems, from drones, all things, will all go into one platform that anybody can plug into to use that data and make available services and ideas for farmers to improve their systems, to go all through the R&D chain. So I'm not talking about something which is a decade away, I'm talking about stuff the industries are now making preparations for to build platforms that will make this work across the whole of agriculture. No one's arguing with me yet. Come on, argue with me. No?
I'll argue with you.
Okay.
Yeah, so you're talking about the connected internet and that sort of thing. Are you familiar with Jeremy Rifkin's world of zero marginal cost?
Yes.
Yeah. So I was just wondering how that plays into the whole picture that you have here, that the basis of it being that, like internet's practically free now and has very little cost to distribute information, that will happen to physical goods in a very similar fashion, where you'll be able to get pretty much anything you need for near zero marginal cost once we get solar panels sorted and all of those sorts of things. So I was just wondered with how this is all sort of rolling out, what your prediction is for that.
That's a big question. That we could spend the next half an hour on.
Yeah, I thought that. Yeah.
Let me answer it in a slightly different way. So the zero cost thing is best exemplified, I guess, by Macpherson, the antivirus guy, right? So he built the antiviral software thing, and he was faced with this question. He said, I've got this thing which cost me $10 million to make from R&D and whatever, and the next 10 million copies I can make for $50. And his answer was to give it away for free. He gave it away and then charged people for the update, so for the value add. So there's still going to be value add in this process. The issue is about where in the chain you're going to be and where is the value going to be added. And that's the key, I think that's the key question in terms of education opportunities for the kids that you're involved in. Mark Andreessen, who's the guy that wrote Netscape, the first sort of real browser, is famous an article 3 or 4 years ago, I think it was in Bloomberg or something, or Washington Post, saying software is eating the world. And that's the same sort of principle, that software is now moving, started sort of with music and books, things that could be easily digitised, and it's moving more and more into that physical world and helping reduce costs. So if you look at, say, the solar costs, solar energy generation costs have fallen 16% a year for the last 15 years. We're moving to the point now, we've just done some work for the sugar mill industry in Queensland, where it's our view that somewhere, depending on how you work it, somewhere between 10 and 30% of the total Queensland energy market could disconnect from the network today as an economic decision. Not as an environmental decision, but as an economic decision. So we're moving, in my view, in the next decade to the point where, about insulation for housing and a whole range of things like that, where we're going to start moving from a scarcity model that says, energy is scarce, so they've got to do all these things, to where energy is going to be close to free because of these technological advances. So it's that sort of stuff, driven by the technology and the data changes, that are enabling that to happen. And that's where the opportunities will be, not in the actual sort of end product process. Is that? Or you could get closer to the customer. You guys would all be familiar, I'm sure, in the last few weeks about this sort of controversy about baby milk powder and availability and going to China, all those sort of stuff. These guys, so this is Nutrico, which is a brand of Camperdown International Dairy in the Western District here in Victoria. They've just signed a deal to supply 10 million cans of that for 15 years, every year for 15 years into China. The interesting thing about it is, if you take that top off the can, underneath it is an aluminium seal foil. On that is a barcode and a QR code that allows you to pick up your phone and scan it, and it will tell you that that is a genuine product, and that code has never been scanned before, so that lid has never been taken off before. Now they're using that, so there's this sort of, this obviously this deep human need for safety and caring for babies that's been affected by the melamine and all this sort of stuff, and they're using that as a jumping off point. They're going, do this. Now, while you're here, would you like to hear about all of our production system? Would you like to visit our farms online? Would you like to do what would you like to know? So they're moving closer and closer to the customer, and they're moving the farmer closer and closer to the customer in that process.
And using Chinese, like using the language of
Yeah, just in Chinese.
Yeah, the language. Yeah.
Well, I think they're actually using a dual, I've seen it in English, so they'll be using a dual language system. But it's that capacity for an individual farmer or a group of farmers to actually connect more with their customer, and there's going to be more and more demand for that sort of information, because once a handful of companies are doing that, it will become a consumer expectation. Okay? We're training a whole lot of consumers that they can have what they want when they want it, and they can have it straight in front of them on their mobile device, driven by data and technology. Or you can move to a complete eco transformation where you say we're going to link up all that R&D. The consumer could say, I'm so connected to this product, I'd actually like to help you fund R&D in terms of, for a future discount on the products that are produced. Or there's a whole range of possible business models where the technology will enable that sort of process. So that's around agriculture, but I said at the beginning that a lot of these skills are transferable. So let me give you one example. I did this in Dubbo the other day and no one knew who they were. Actually, one person put it in the hand and said, that's Tommy Hawkins, which I thought was pretty good from the back. In New South Wales, a little bit now. So, Brian Lake, right? Fantastic story. Mad as a cut snake, I reckon, but fantastic story. Post the grand final this year, he was out there in the media going, I really want to play on, you know, blah, 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 I'm going to go. A week later, he's gone. Now, I happen to know a little bit of this inside story, and I can't reveal how, but there was a public interview with Alistair Clarkson where he talked about that process. And what he said was they've been measuring the physical capacities of those Hawthorn players twice a week for the last 5 years. And they've got all these curves about where people are and where they sit and where they are. And he said that Brian Lake had started to fall off the necessary curve in the last half of that season. And they knew from all of their other information and data that once that started, that process accelerates, and by the end of next year he was going to be way off the pace, so gone. So the conversation Brian Lake was having with the media was never going to happen. He was gone. They decided he was cut 3 months before the grand final. Right? Now, if you think about that, and we go back to this sort of software's eating the world model, if we talk about healthcare, I'm particularly talking about healthcare and then aged care concept here. You know, we think about healthcare and we think about telemedicine and all this sort of communication. What this really looks like is a whole range of network business models driven by data and information. Now, if you go back to that picture and you place that picture, you put on Brian, I didn't do this, but if you put my mother's head on Brian Lake's body, be a bit frightening actually. Now I think about it, it's the first time I thought about that. For example, I'm doing some work with an aged care group where what we're proposing is, and this is for regional communities, that why don't they go out into their communities and say most people who are in their late 50s or early 60s that live in those communities aren't going to leave. And so one of the great things about sort of those regional communities is can we keep those people and happy lives connected to their community for as long as possible. So, if you gave, I'll use Fitbit as an example because I've already used it with the cows, if you gave every 55-year-old a Fitbit in those communities and followed them for the next 15 years, 5 years, whatever it may be, we can move to a system where you think about aged care being 3 steps. One is assistance, so living in your own home but still, you know, getting assistance with the gardening or doing something with the roof or cleaning the leaves out, whatever that may be, maybe meals. 2, residential village type stuff where you still have your own setup but you're actually in a more formal setting. 2, actual aged care, you know, hospital type environment. If we can follow those people all the way through, we can get a whole lot of data that's really, really important. For 2 reasons. We can go to my mother, who's 77, and say, look, you started to fall off this curve. When Brian Lake starts to fall off this curve, he's stuffed, right? Because it's about elite performance. But if my mother starts falling off that curve, it's actually possible to restore her back to the curve. And if you can have that conversation, let me pick on the youngest person in the room, otherwise I'll pick on someone older and they'll think I'm insulting them. We can have this conversation, you mentioned you're now 77, we can have this conversation that's data enabled. It's still a personal conversation that's about where you're going to live and how your life is going to be, but we can say to you, if you can restore yourself back to the curve, you can stay out of moving out of your own home. All the data says people on the curve stay in their own home 5 years longer. Would you like to do that?
Yes.
And you can do this fitness program or this cognitive program or aerobics or walking or whatever it may be, we've got a whole range of programs which is supplied to you that will keep you on, put you back on that curve and help you live the life you want to live. Now in those regional communities, if we can do that, I think we can build more and more aged care facilities and maintain those aged care facilities, which are under pressure right now. We can actually build a much better capacity for help people to age in place and age in the community than we previously had. And you think about the demographics of, we're getting older, I know I am, we're getting older and older as a society. If you think about the age demographic, there's going to be a huge demand for those sort of things in regional communities. And the exact same skills I'm talking about in terms of technology and data are completely transferable over here. So what was the question before that was asked? We don't think about the generation X and Y, don't think about careers. They can go, I was an agricultural scientist for 7 years doing this, now I'm going to be an aged care predictive analytics person. Because the technology and the skills are transferable in that process. For that aged care facility, they get huge value out of that. Because if they can see all of the data of all the people in the community coming through, they can plan their throughput. They know where people are going to be at various stages. They know how much residential space they need. They can do a whole range of things. And they can make money out of the process. If they are the trusted advisor that says to you, you can do this or do that, they can actually have recommended people that use that. They can get a cut along the way. They can do a whole lot of other business models that help the aged care facility become more economically viable. But be transparent in that process. I'm not talking about bribes and corruption. I'm talking about taking a role in that ecosystem. That's only one example. The same thing's going to happen in general healthcare. The same thing's going to happen across a range of industries. So if we can give kids opportunities in this way, we do two things. We give them multiple career opportunities and possibilities to live and thrive in the country if they wish to do so. And we give our communities the capacity to thrive and grow and have viable business models as well. Because a lot of this stuff, we're talking about agriculture, we're talking about aged care, we're talking about medicine, we're talking about a whole range of things, a lot of it is deliverable from a distance. A lot of it is going to be internet enabled. Now, a lot of it's still touch, and people still got to come and feel and be. I got taught in veterinary science, you learn more, you miss more by not looking than you do by not knowing. So you still got to have that capacity. But these sort of services are going to be able to be supplied over the internet in a lot of cases, mobile phone systems, which means that the regions can have a choice. They can say we can build this capacity, and we can actually service our own needs and service the rest of the world doing the same thing, or we can sit back and go, we'll buy services in from elsewhere. Because a lot of the value is going to be created up that stack, and we can pay for it, but that money will flow out of our regional communities rather than into our regional communities, and the people and the jobs will go with it. So there's huge opportunities here in my view. So, last part is what are the skills? And I think, Darren and others talked about that before, and I largely agree with them. There's technical skills. It comes back to what I was arguing about your iPhone example or tractor example before. It means skills up the stack as well, not just at the user interface. But design is really important in that process as well. So design skills, not just talking about technology skills. Because it takes real ability to produce that interface which people can use intuitively. And it's not just about technology, it's about understanding people, it's about understanding networks, it's about understanding the social issues in a regional community. There's a whole range of things tied in with that design process that have nothing to do with technology, they're actually about understanding the customer. Collaboration. So more and more of these models are going to be generated by collaborations and networks than they are going to be as a single person or a company. Having said that, most of the large companies are moving towards, most of the large communities, corporations are moving towards some of these models as well. So who uses LinkedIn in the room? A few? Yeah. So LinkedIn figured out a few months ago that a lot of people inside large companies were using LinkedIn to communicate with their own staff. because the LinkedIn system of servicing what people are interested in, connecting to people, was better than the company's internal communication systems. So they actually just launched about a month ago an actual app that does that inside companies for people. So these collaboration networks will happen inside large organisations, between large organisations, between individuals. And if you want to be able to supply services out of Widgie-Proof to rural India doing something, you need to collaborate in different ways. And the last one, if we're talking purely about agriculture, is the understanding of agricultural business models. That's more than just the hands-on you were talking about before in relation to animals or crops or those sort of things. It's understanding how the business model works all the way through the chain, understanding the customer all the way back. Because all the data and all the technology is completely useless if it's not used to solve a problem or create value. And to do that, you need to understand how those business models work. Now, let's put this up as an example. So these guys, right, so Intel and Qualcomm have actually started up this open drone foundation. And it harks back, in my view, to those computer clubs of the late 1960s, early 70s, where Apple grew out of. A lot of the space here is going on because people are hacking or making or breaking or doing stuff because they're just playing with stuff. A lot of development is going to come out of these sort of systems. These guys aren't doing it out of altruism. Their view is if drones get used more, if drones get cheaper, if better models get created, they'll sell a whole lot more chips. Right? So they're doing it as a business model, but they're actually, it's like an instead of open source software, it's open source hardware. There's going to be huge capacities for individuals to start playing with these sort of things if you talk about technical skills. And then there's things like this. So are you guys familiar with this, ACRE, the Australian Centre for Rural Entrepreneurship? So it's just started as a pilot model over in Beechworth. And they're looking to, in the education system, but outside the education system as well, to develop entrepreneurs around business models and possibilities outside of standard classrooms. So we match together those technical skills, the ability to collaborate and the capacity to understand business models and be entrepreneurs. Those are the sort of three sort of key sets of skills which need to be built on top of the original stack, right? The original stack is reading, writing, arithmetic, critical problem solving skills. If we then have those technical skills, collaboration skills and entrepreneurial business model skills on top of that, there are huge opportunities for the kids that are in your schools to actually have fantastically rewarding careers. And education is not just about careers, obviously, but also being able to contribute to building and helping maintain their communities and making contributions to those communities. And there's a huge capacity and opportunity for that right now. And the people that will survive in that environment are these people. Sorry, I've got to add this bit. So, you need three things in my view. Passion, market, and skills. If you have passion and market, if you have passion and skills and no market, that's what's called a hobby. If you have passion and market but no skills, that's what's called failure. And if you have market and skills but no passion, that's what's called burnout. So what you need to do is find, I think I've hopefully demonstrated to you that there's a market out there, and a huge market, a huge possibility and opportunity. What you need to do is actually find people's passion and then help them get the skills that will do that. On the weekend I had dinner with my best friend and his son has just joined the PSOs, right, the public safety. His father has lamented about him for a number of years. He was one of those kids at school that wasn't really interested and didn't really try. He then became a professional triathlete, an absolute focus on those things, but then went to university at the same time and dropped out of there because he couldn't be bothered. He's joined the PSOs and he loves it. And his first two exams he got 100% on both of them. And his classmates have started calling him textbook Tom. His name's Tom. And his father just sits there shaking his head going. But it's about that connection of igniting that passion. That's something I really want to do, then I will apply myself. And so it's about connecting those up in terms of the skills that people will need. And that's sweet spot. And now I get the picture of those people that will win this game will be those people. So the people that are, you know, I was listening down before about rethinking what that school looks like, about rethinking what agriculture looks like. I taught a class at the veterinary school last week, and one of the master students got me really riled up because I was talking about all these possibilities and business models they could do, and his response was, well, traditionally that's not really our role. I restrained myself from hitting. I don't like to hit students. But it's those sort of people, it's that sort of capacity, it's the things to look at this differently that the winners will be in this process. Because while there's huge opportunities, there's also huge threats, and I worry a fair bit about that artificial intelligence, robotic stuff, pushing humans out of a lot of roles, and there's sort of a twin-edged sword, I guess, here about huge opportunity, but also huge risk. The biggest risk is sitting back and not doing anything because you'll be pushed around by those things. So we do have a couple of minutes, and no one's won a t-shirt so far, so
No.
I will take them home.
I got a hand up over here.
Paul, Claire and I are very excited about the future in which you group now, because you've told us that we'll be better looked after when we're older. And you've given Claire's 2 boys are likely to go onto the farm, and I said, there's a business, let's get them into drones, you know, we'll start teaching that at school. So very exciting for the school. I just want to know in the future if there's something about rain.
About rain.
Can they make it rain for us up there?
Uh,
That's all we need. We've got everything. We'll be connected, as you said. We'll all be, you know, we'll all be at the touch of our fingers. We just need rain.
well, I wouldn't be relying on that by any means. I mean, I've got a pig farm right in Kahuna, but if I talk more generally about foresight in the future, I always say it's about helping people deal with uncertainty, and that's going to be continued uncertainty. So you have to have strategies which deal with that uncertainty, not hope or wish for something to come. Can't help you with the rain.
I'm just wondering, you know, the technology that you're talking about in agriculture, already we're seeing our farmers getting slammed down, you know, the fact that they don't cut the meat, they don't give the farmers the money to actually cut the meat, and all of this productivity. Now you're talking about technology, and you know, you're probably going to have Big Brother having the insight into how much productivity these farmers are going to make. So once again, the wash is going to come down again, and they're going to be pushing farmers into the ground again and again to get better, a cheaper quality product. So where's the argument in that? How are the farmers going to be able to manage that now or in the future?
I would just be in premise. So I have a t-shirt I wear sometimes, and I wear today, which has got on it, your broken business model is not my problem. Customer doesn't care. The data is showing consistently year after year and decade after decade that the best 20% of farmers are very, very profitable. Right? So within that system, they can still make lots of money. What I have been saying to farmers, and I do this a lot with farmers, is you can do this yourself. Don't sit back and wait for John Deere or Monsanto or these sort of companies to supply you services. I say to dairy farmers, none of you can walk out of this room and make yogurt, but you do. You've got Murray Goulburn, you've got these cooperatives. You should treat data as another product from your farm, and you should be retaining ownership of it, and you should be building the drone companies and the services and to retain that value to improve your own productivity.
But aren't they just going to look for imported products? Big Brother will, like, you know,
No,
and you're talking only about 1/5 of what farmers being productive. I don't 1/5.
But that 1/5 now produces more than 70% of the product. We're not talking about 1/5 of the number, we're not talking about 1/5 of agriculture. So there's huge amounts of profitability in agriculture. What I'm saying is, you know, go back to that Intel, the foundation stuff. Why can't these guys in Witchy-Proof build a drone company that will actually do that sort of stuff by hooking to that, by getting the kids involved, by getting farmers involved, and being a cooperative that owns it themselves and owns that value line? The two choices are, I'll do that, or I'll sit back and wait for someone else to make the money in that area, and I'll continue to complain about not making money. I know where my choice is, it's over here. And I live this. I've been in farming for 26 years. I chose to go into it and I'm inherited. So it's about taking hold of the things you can do something about and doing something about that, not sitting back and worrying about what other people do.
That's a very good point to end on, I think. Can everyone